also millions of New Yorkers, myself included, care deeply about what's happening in Israel and Palestine. And so to be very, very clear, of course I condemn Hamas. Of course I've called October 7th what it was, which is a horrific war crime. And of course, my belief in a universality in international law is also the same set of beliefs that have led me to describe what's happening in Gaza as a genocide. Because what we see is a war crime being answered with war crimes. And what we see is every single hour the Israeli military killing a Palestinian child for close to 2 years. And it's a horror that many New Yorkers feel so deeply. And my job, I can't stop that as the mayor of the city. I can make clear my own values, my own commitments. And it is a value and a commitment to humanity, to safety, to justice for all people that extends to everyone, Israelis, Palestinians, and everyone else across the world.
And recognizing that people do disagree with you.
Absolutely.
I am one of those people on some of these points.
Absolutely. So. And that you're disagreeing with me doesn't mean that you shouldn't be in this city or you shouldn't be celebrated and part of the city that I'm trying to lead. And I think that's the other part of growing up as a New Yorker, learning that disagreement and difference is part of what it means to be here. And I want to be a mayor, not just for the people who voted for me, not just for the people who agree with me, but every New Yorker. And that means that if a New Yorker disagrees with me about Israel, I'm still fighting for them to make sure that they can afford this city, be safe in this city, and see the city as their home.
Mamdani gave a masterclass on The View today of how you handle questions when people are trying to trip you up. I find The View to be insufferable. And big props to him for going on the show. I'm sure he was super prepared. I mean, masterclass. They tried to trip him up on basically every single question they asked him. They tried to trip him up on his stance of Israel and his previous statements. They tried to trip him up on his previous statements about the NYPD needing to be defunded. Even the question that Joy gave him about Trump accusing him of being a communist, she just had a bad attitude. And mind you, his Cuomo, they've asked to come on, but I doubt he's going to come on because he's going to be grilled and he doesn't want to answer those questions. So Mamdani comes on and they treat him as if they want to tear him down. Come on, man. This is the people's choice. He's up in the polls. He won the primary handedly. And you got all these people sitting on this panel basically hating him. Masterclass. Like, respect to him for even going. But like, come on, man, this is the people's choice. Get over it. Establishment, get over it, move on.
He's gonna win the election. This is New York. This is your next mayor. And that's what you get. That's all I'm gonna say. That's what you get. Not enough conservatives ran for office, because let me tell you this. Where are all the conservatives that are intelligent, that can articulate themselves, that have a mission and a plan for success for New York, that actually ran? If you look at the leaderboard, and I saw the guy that was the Republican, man, he ain't got what it takes. And none of y'all ran, so don't get mad. Y'all didn't show up to vote, so don't get mad. Mayor Adams dropped out because y'all didn't support Mayor Adams. And Mayor Adams would have been a better candidate than Mamdani. So what you got is what you deserve. And I'm not going to say nothing about, don't talk about the left, because there's millions and millions of Republicans and conservatives and people in the middle that live in New York. There's billionaires and there's people that can fund and support other candidates, but y'all let this dummy get through. Now, here you go.
So, Zoran, back in 2020, you called for defunding the police, something you've since walked back. You also called the NYPD racist, anti-queer, and a threat to public safety in 2020, but now agree they deserve an apology. You initially refused to denounce highly charged rhetoric related to Israel, then later said you would discourage its use. How can New Yorkers trust you and not be concerned that consultants are getting in your ear to get you elected, but you still hold all of those positions?
Well, they can rest assured that it isn't consultants in my ear. And I think this is another part of, to be a young person looking to lead is also to leave the opening for growth and understanding. And I can tell you, growing up in this city, I thought often about safety and justice, and I saw how justice was often left aside, whether it was the Central Park Five, whether it was Sean Bell, whether it was Eric Garner, whether it was watching the news of Michael Brown, and then in 2020 to see the murder of George Floyd, it felt as if there had never been a wider chasm in my life between those things. And after that, becoming an assembly member And learning about the ways in which you deliver justice is by intertwining it with safety. Can't be done alone. And learning that behind the headlines, behind the caricatures, we're speaking about police officers who are just trying to do their best. And my job as a mayor is to represent those officers who put their lives on the line, represent Muslim New Yorkers who were illegally surveilled, represent Black and brown New Yorkers who've been the victims of police brutality, and do all of it
And
with
Jewish
a commitment.
Americans who have
Absolutely.
fallen danger.
And white people, everybody. You talk about everybody.
This
And
is a
can I-
run-on sentence that includes every New Yorker because of the fact that safety and justice can be non-negotiable no matter who we're speaking about.
And can I ask, have you formally apologized to the NYPD?
These are conversations that I'm having individually with officers. And I've appreciated that because it's through those conversations with rank and file officers that I've learned more about the difficulties of this job. The difficulties where, you know, for example, when I started running this race, about 200 officers were leaving the department every month. Now it's 350. And when you ask officers why, they'll tell you forced overtime. And what they mean by that is, you know, you got 3 days off at the end of the week, you're planning a trip with your family, and at the last minute you're told, second day you got to be back. And part of the reason you got to be back is because we're asking cops to do everything we can think of. We're asking them to handle mental health calls, we're asking them to deal with homelessness. Every year now, cops respond to 200,000 mental health calls. So our proposal is allow the officers to do their job of tackling serious crime and create a Department of Community Safety that deals with homelessness, that deals with mental health crisis, so that we don't have response times like we do today, which are closer to 16 minutes.
I want you guys to look at Joy's face whenever they start clapping for him.
Now cops respond to 200,000 mental health calls. So our proposal is allow the officers to do their job of tackling serious crime and create a Department of Community Safety that deals with homelessness, that deals with mental health crisis, so that we don't have response times like we do today, which are closer to 16 minutes.
I'll tell you what, when I first heard that Zoran Mamdani, this socialist candidate for mayor, was going to be on The View, I thought, oh no, this is going to be a slobber fest with these cackling left-wing hens drooling all over him. I don't know if you've ever seen The View, but it's not exactly 60 Minutes. But then I was pleasantly surprised by Alyssa Farah Griffin, who I'd never paid attention to before, but she pressed Zoran Mamdani and asked if he was going to formally apologize to the NYPD for calling them a racist, for saying they were homophobic, and for saying they make the city less safe, which is what he said in the past. And she knew that, which impressed me. And he said that he was going to talk to them individually. Really? You're going to talk to 33,000 of them? It was such a BS answer. And of course, everybody else tried to jump in because that's what The View is. They all want their time on the air. But Alyssa Farah Griffin then said, so you're not going to give a formal apology? A follow-up. Wow. And he said, yes, of course, I will apologize. But I'm also going to apologize, he said, to the Muslim New Yorkers who were wrongfully surveilled, and for the Black and brown citizens of New York who were either unlawfully arrested or harassed. Wow. I think that's disqualifying to be mayor, to tell you the truth. The fact that he won't take back comments he made about the NYPD, saying that they're racist, they're homophobic, and that they actually hurt the security of New York. But what was more interesting about the whole thing is, why did it take Alyssa Farah Griffin on The View to ask that question? The New York City media, the so-called political reporters, should be ashamed of themselves. They have been slobbering all over him. And it took The View to show us who he really is. I'll tell you what. The reporters in New York should watch tapes of Alyssa Farah Griffin and do better.
Did anyone else watch the Zoran Mamdani interview on The View on ABC recently? No, it's not great because The View is filled with like incredible policy wonks who want to ask him complex questions. No, it was great because once again, Zoran Mamdani held his own against people who were obviously against him. Surprise, surprise, the super rich people who were on TV all the time being paid millions of dollars want to frame the guy who's going to probably raise taxes, at least on the millionaires and billionaires, as crazy and radical. I don't know if you heard, but manufacturing consent doesn't really work anymore. At least not from the traditional sense that it did when Noam Chomsky coined the term. By the way, if you're not aware, manufacturing consent is the idea that if you control the outlets, you can control what the normalized discourse is on something. So say, oh, we're allowed to talk about it. Really, they only discuss this part as the edge of a framing here, and we discuss this part as the edge of the framing there. When really, the actual subject covers stuff over here as well, but that's not normal to talk about. So like when we talk about healthcare options, news will say, well, we have the option for a partial public option or full privatization. Well, wait a minute, what about just getting rid of the private stuff altogether and only having public? No one enjoys their private insurance. Why are we even having it stay in the discussion? These guys, though, think that they can convince people who are struggling to pay their bills, to pay for rent, to pay for healthcare, to pay for their college, that this guy's a radical when all he wants to do is make it so that people are able to afford to live. And I'm sorry, it's not going to work. Everyone has the internet now. Everyone's aware how expensive things are gotten. You can't hide this or pretend that these sort of proposals are crazy. And this is why we even have the way things are right now, unfortunately, because whenever you don't offer real solutions, people who aren't really connected to everything start to go, well, I'm desperate, so who's going to tell me a reason as to why this is happening? And demagogues, like you-know-who, to slip in and go, oh, it's because of that brown person over there. Oh, it's because of that person who wears the weird thing on their head and worships this person who sounds like a crazy thing to you who worships this other thing. I just was amazed by it because once again, Zoran held his own, and it gave me the same feeling as watching that Bernie Sanders town hall. He did a town hall with the guys at Fox News that they thought would be this great ambush. They took him to like a super red county. Like you can see like the old hollowed out factory behind them while they're doing the talk, and they thought, this is gonna be good. And they proceeded to be like, oh shit, by the end, because Bernie's message resonates with people regardless of their supposed personal politics, because at the end of the day, most Americans are struggling, and he gives actual policy prescriptions as to what can be done to fix this and gives the actual reasons as to why. And mouthpieces don't want you to hear that. Anyway, go check out the interview. It's a mix of fun to watch him respond and, Neo his way out of like some of their dumb questions they ask, but it's also going to raise your blood pressure if you're anything like me, and you're going to be furious that once again the rich people are trying to say that this guy who wants to make it so people can afford to have childcare and healthcare and groceries and rent is a crazy radical. New York, please don't mess this up. If you guys can get him in, I think it's a sign of good things to come.
So ladies and gentlemen, as you've seen, Zoran Mamdani was recently interviewed by The View by a number of TV personalities. They discussed the Israeli-Palestinian war, and as you've seen, Zoran Mamdani has been harshly criticized by Officer Brandon Tatum, a self-declared Zionist. This is because Mamdani went ahead to call out the activities of the IDF in Gaza. And as you've heard as well, they talked about Mamdani's policy of defunding the police, which he had stated back in 2020 after the unfortunate demise of George Floyd. So he tackled this question, I would say, brilliantly, because he showed that a person can evolve, his thinking can be overtaken by events, and he can adapt and change his mind. So there have been this number of reactions, and I hope that you have been able to extract a lot of information, absorb it, and make your own conclusion. So the election is around the corner. New Yorkers are supposed to vote in November. So I hope that people think critically and make a sound decision when it comes to electing the next mayor. So ladies and gentlemen, that has been it. Don't forget to leave a like, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers and peace.